That is the FBI working with the public as I promised, being transparent and provided critical information along the way in the manhunt for the suspect or suspects involved in Charlie's assassination. We received over 11,000 tips in the first 24 hours alone. We received 16,000 submissions to our digital media enterprise and tip lines. That is a large number of material to go through.
Things that are of interest. Okay, yesterday we mentioned that apparently it was kind of everybody's first day on the job, right? 9/10 was everybody's first day on the job, meaning that there were a lot of these recent and brand new hires in Utah that would all kind of come across and have to deal with this case. Kash Patel, I told you, cleaned house at the state borough. He then installs a person that has a long tenure in D.C., Robert Bowles. His first case is Charlie Kirk's assassination. Why would he want to uproot and move his family to Utah after having roots in Virginia for so long? I don't know, but that's the circumstance. Also, I told you there was a new CEO and therefore a new lead surgeon, Andrew Zenger, over at the hospital, the regional hospital that Charlie was taken to, although that was not the nearest hospital from the university. And it also ranked extremely low in terms of the most best equipped hospital, if you will, to deal with the sort of trauma that Charlie was suffering from, a neck wound, obviously. So it's very strange. I think it would be interesting to learn whether or not that new CEO and surgeon worked on Charlie. That's something that I would like to find out. If you know that information, please send it to us at tips@CandaceOwens.com. Okay. That's not it, though. There were also some other new people, and I forgot to mention the judge that is in the case, that is overseeing the case against Tyler Robinson, is Judge Tony F. Graff Jr. He was recently appointed to the 4th District Court in May of 2025 by Governor Spencer Cox. I was also informed that the coroner in this case was also brand spanking new. That name has not yet been released. I am told that person is new. Okay. And I have also learned, I've been told that Charlie did indeed have an autopsy. I wanted to let you guys know that because I saw a lot of rumors that were circulating that he did not have an autopsy. That has been confirmed. An autopsy did take place. By the way, you should know that in the state of Utah, in case you, like me, are maybe holding your breath that we're going to see that report, those reports are actually kept private. So there isn't going to be some big release outside of what maybe the immediate family members wishing for that and saying, I feel like something's wrong and I would now like to release the autopsy report. That's the only way that we are going to be able to see it. That's at least what I've learned.
No one is asking for chaos. No one is demanding wild theories or reckless accusations. What people want is simple. A process called justice, not management. They said the investigation was ongoing. They said nothing was being rushed. But behind closed doors, Utah officials are being approached with a message that isn't written down and isn't supposed to be repeated. Because when a public assassination collides with federal interests, the goal doesn't always look like justice. Sometimes it looks like closure. Please, before we proceed, don't forget to drop your comment as you listening to this new updates. We would appreciate it when you do so because we will definitely respond to everything. We will be glad to hear your feedbacks on this report and contributions. We stand for justice. We stand for Charlie. Witnesses are being told to stay within approved statements. Certain evidence has been sealed before ever seeing a courtroom. And sources inside the legal arena are quietly using a phrase that raises eyebrows every time: federal urgency. So before we talk about suspects, timelines, or court filings, ask yourself this: who decides when a case is over? Local investigators, or the people no one is allowed to question? What do you think? Is the case moving forward carefully, or is progress being slowed by procedural delays? Share your thoughts in the comments below. That's where we hear your thoughts and where you're watching from. To stay updated on every development, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you stay informed as new updates become available. This is Detective Max, and together we stand and fight for justice. Charlie Kirk was on campus in Utah, speaking in an open university setting when everything stopped in an instant. There were no warning signs, no escalation, just a sudden crack that turned a public event into a crime scene. Within minutes, law enforcement moved in. Students were cleared from walkways and gathering areas. Camera access was cut. Live coverage disappeared. And before most people even processed what had happened, a name was already circulating: Tyler Robinson. Officials acted with unusual speed, and that's exactly where the questions began. From the very first hours, things didn't follow the standard pattern. Entire sections of the campus were sealed before all witnesses were even identified. Some areas were blocked off so fast that people who were present never returned to give statements. Key documents were labeled restricted almost immediately. Even preliminary filings like evidence logs and early investigative notes were held back from public record. Federal officials appeared on site faster than anyone expected. Not days later, not after coordination meetings, almost immediately. And their arrival wasn't explained through any public briefing. That's where the public's concerns started, not from rumor, but from silence. If this was normal agency support, why were local investigators suddenly sharing space and control before state-level procedures were completed? There's a difference between cooperation and quiet authority, and right now no one outside the system can say which one this is. People aren't just asking who fired the shot, they're asking who took over before the investigation even began. So the real issue isn't timing, it's influence. Was this coordinated assistance or early control wearing the uniform of protocol? When information gets sealed before answers are given, the public notices, and they should. In the weeks following the shooting, something changed, not in what was said publicly, but in how decisions were being made behind the scenes. Several legal analysts and individuals close to the process have quietly suggested that Utah investigators weren't operating with full independence. Not because of open conflict, but because of federal direction disguised as guidance. And to be clear, no one is alleging direct threats. What's being described is pressure, the kind that doesn't show up in a headline, but can redirect a case without leaving fingerprints. Certain phrases have started appearing in internal conversations, filings, and legal summaries, phrases that normally show up in national security cases, not state homicide investigations. Expedited resolution, a polite way of saying finish this fast, national security considerations. A label that can override standard transparency, federal interest, a broad term that quietly shifts decision-making out of local hands. These aren't accusations, they're patterns. What's raising eyebrows is the timing. The tone of the investigation changed early, long before all the evidence had even been processed. Requests for slowed review, expanded interviews, or delayed filings reportedly met quiet pushback. Nobody is saying the FBI is silencing people. But many are asking, why did the pace of this case move from investigative to administrative in record time? Why were local officials suddenly using language usually heard in federal briefings? Why were timelines being compressed instead of extended? And why were outside agencies sitting at the table before all state-level procedures were complete? The public isn't being told the investigation is over, but the speed, tone, and structure suggests someone wants it to be. And that raises the question no one wants to ask out loud: is Utah leading this case or just carrying it? To understand why so many people are uneasy, you have to look at the timeline, not the headlines, not the press releases, the actual sequence of decisions. From the moment the shooting occurred, the direction of the case was set almost immediately. Within days, the narrative narrowed to one suspect. Tyler Robinson was treated not just as the primary lead, but as the only lead, before digital evidence, location data, or third-party footage could be fully analyzed. Witness confusion was brushed aside instead of clarified. Several accounts didn't line up. Some reported different angles, different sounds, or different positions of law enforcement on site. Rather than investigating those inconsistencies, officials moved on quickly and locked in the storyline. Phrases like closing loose ends surfaced before the evidence review was complete. Ballistics analysis hadn't been finalized. Phone and digital records were still being sorted. Undisclosed footage, some taken by students and onlookers, hadn't been fully accounted for. In any major investigation, the order should be confirm evidence, eliminate doubt, then move forward. But here the order looked reversed. A conclusion first, verification second. That's what has legal professionals, analysts, and even some retired prosecutors asking the uncomfortable question, is the goal to close the file or to actually complete the investigation? Because speed isn't always efficiency. Sometimes speed is control, and when the pace of a case gets faster than the facts can keep up with, it stops looking like resolution and starts looking like direction. The public isn't demanding drama, they're demanding due process. And right now, the timeline raises more questions than it answers. Utah isn't new to high-profile cases, but it does have something that makes this situation different. A state system that usually insists on handling its own investigations before outside agencies step in. Which is why people are asking, why here and why so fast? The federal presence wasn't reactive, it was immediate. Before the public had answers, and before state investigators could take full lead, federal personnel were already involved in shaping procedures, managing information flow, and determining what would and wouldn't be made available. Insiders say this wasn't presented as a takeover. It was framed as necessary oversight and protective coordination. But those are the kinds of phrases that raise more questions than they answer. Behind closed doors, 3 justifications reportedly came up: potential national implications. Anytime an incident involves a politically recognized figure, it becomes more than a state matter. Security image management. Not about safety in the moment, but about how the event is handled, perceived, and reported. Federal jurisdiction overlap, a vague catch-all term that can justify nearly any level of intervention. Yet the public was never briefed on why the federal role began so early, or why local officials appeared to step back faster than protocol would normally allow. This isn't about blaming one agency over another. It's about transparency. Because when federal influence enters a state case without explanation, it leaves room for doubt. Was Utah leading and Washington assisting? Or was Utah front-facing while someone else pulled the levers? People don't need speculation to feel uncertainty. They just need to see decisions happening without answers. And if Utah, a state with strong jurisdictional independence, was so quickly overshadowed, the next question becomes unavoidable. Was this cooperation or quiet authority with a polite label? The heart of the unease isn't just about who's involved, it's about who's being heard and who suddenly isn't. In any major investigation, transparency builds confidence, but in this case, silence has been speaking louder than official statements. Community members, students who were present, and even some legal observers have all noticed the same shift. Public communication slowed down at the exact moment federal involvement sped up. And here's where the concern grows, not from rumor, but from contrast. Families and local advocates were told to be patient, yet federal language was already circling around resolution, not investigation. Even attorneys watching from the outside say the tone changed faster than they expected. Instead of gathering every angle, every witness, every file, the pace began to resemble management rather than examination. And the public is left to ask, if nothing is being restricted improperly, why is so much being handled out of sight? If federal guidance is purely supportive, why are state investigators no longer speaking freely? Nobody is accusing the FBI or federal agencies of silencing anyone. But when access narrows, statements get standardized, and evidence goes dark under sealed filings, people notice. And here's the truth, most officials don't want to acknowledge. You don't have to hide something to lose public trust. You just have to act like you might. Because the more this case is handled in private rooms, off-record calls, and sealed documentation, the more ordinary people start wondering, is the system protecting the process, or protecting itself? When people hear talk of closing the case, they assume it means justice is complete, evidence reviewed, questions answered, accountability secured. But in situations like this, closing a case too early can mean something entirely different. And that's what has legal observers uneasy. Because if the push to finalize this case is real, even quietly, the impact doesn't stop at a courtroom door. Here's what a premature closure would actually do. Unanswered questions stay unanswered. Witnesses with conflicting accounts aren't re-interviewed. Footage that hasn't resurfaced remains buried. Digital trails go cold. public access disappears. Once a case is sealed or administratively resolved, evidence becomes harder to request, harder to challenge, and easier to forget.